I've heard it often said in the personal training realm that research is sports history or fitness history, and that trainers and coaches are always ahead of research. I completely disagree based on what I've seen in the last 15 years of reality in training. And I'll tell you that in a second. What I want to preface this to say is that if you're familiar with any of my work, you know that we're research influence, but I don't like to really push the research and try to quantify every little detail. I leave that to my friends like Brad Schoenfeld and Brett Contreras and Alan Aragon and Jonathan Fast, because they do that stuff wonderfully. We tend to like to use the research and express it through the art and application, which is what we do best. We simplify the complex stuff and we leave the complex stuff to some of my friends who I just mentioned. But that being said, let's get back to this whole thing about trainers being ahead of research and why I don't believe that just matches what I've seen in reality. Let's take the transverse abdominis draw-in, for instance. That was kind of touted really big in the mid-90s by a few sources, and of course it branched out because it got very, very popular. People love core stuff. Any magic bullet for the core, we're all about that. And first off, if you look at the research that Hodges did and back then in the 90s, they never said the transverse abdominis was weak. They never said that you needed to do it during strength training. So basically what I'm telling you is the applications that we learned for it and the reasoning it was developed that we learned originally were completely misinterpreted and never what the research said in the beginning. But yet to this day, you still have personal trainers doing TVA draw-in. And for years and years and years and years and years, even though we were already behind the research, we thought we were ahead of it, but we weren't. We were doing it wrong. Now, if we were doing it wrong or misapplying it, wouldn't it have shown up? So this is where the people say, oh, well, you know, if a coach tries something and in 6 months they know whether it works or not, and by the time the researchers get to it, the researcher said, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. And the coach goes, oh, well, I already figured that out, 10 months ago or whatever, because it takes so many years to get research out and done and all that stuff. Well, here's a prime example. So 20 years trainers were doing this, and if it wasn't working, how come nobody saw it? How come it took the work of another back specialist to tell us that, hey, maybe this not be the best way to go, and maybe we need to brace instead, when we misinterpreted it from the get-go? Let's look at posture and corrective exercise. The research behind that. Now, I'm not going to get into that polarizing topic and say whether this is good or this is bad. We're just talking about research here. The research on using postural assessments or movement assessments and trying to correct different body dysfunctions and malalignments and all these things through stretching and exercise is about as stable as a Bosu ball, the evidence-based platform. Most of the research out there on all that stuff since the late 70s, early 80s has completely undermined what many of the things that we're still learning to this day and that have been evolved. One person learns about this and then they take it to this and they take it to this. But the foundations have almost been eroded in the research, but yet it still gets recycled. So again, don't focus on what I'm talking about, the corrective exercise. Focus on what I'm talking about here about being ahead of the research. Let's look at unstable surface training. We still have people standing on balls, jumping on Bosus, lifting weights, and doing all these things saying they're trying to get stronger. Well, the research, and it's kind of obvious, shows that you can't overload the muscle enough to gain hypertrophy, or if you're trying to gain strength, it's about force production, so you have to put force into the ground to then produce force somewhere onto a bat or to dumbbells or a barbell or whatever, but yet we still have trainers lifting weights while standing on unstable objects. And that has also been shown in the research to not be the best application. Unstable surface training is for balance, for proprioceptively enriched environments, not necessarily to be blended with strength training. So we're at 3 examples of things that are really permeating the industry to this day: core training, unstable surface training, and assessments that are way behind the research. In many cases, we just ignore the research because we have this need to want to believe the people who are teaching us. And that's where I just say it's up to us, and I'm a teacher, but before I'm a teacher, I'm a student, It's up to challenge beliefs and ask for evidence and check out evidence. But just blowing off research and saying that, oh, well, I'm already ahead of research, or the people teaching me are already ahead of research, I would tell you is completely inaccurate.